Welcome to Sounds of Resistance channel. The Ukrainian armed forces passed over the Russian army like a tsunami with their latest attacks. Attacking in growing waves, the Ukrainian armed forces achieved incredible success and chased the Russian army almost to the Russian border. The fleeing Russian army is moving towards the areas they consider safe in Donbass, and even crossing the Russian border, they take refuge in Belgorod. The invading forces in Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kharkiv regions fled so quickly in the massive counterattack of the Ukrainian warriors that they left a lot of weapons and ammunition behind as they fled. In fact, the scenery behind the escape of the Russians in the east of Ukraine was reflected in the lenses many times. The Ukrainian armed forces did not hesitate to share these images and showed the whole world the helplessness and cowardice of the Russian army and the separatists. They reported that Ukrainian commanders left behind the Russians hot meals, even their clothes. After months of telegraphing to the south with intent to counterattack, the Ukrainian army launched a lightning strike this month in the northeastern Kharkiv region, capturing thousands of square miles, dozens of towns and villages, and key centers such as Izium, a railroad hub for the east. After the early defeat of Russian troops in the battle for the Ukrainian capital of Kiev, the Kharkiv counteroffensive became Ukraine's most successful military operation. Ukrainian authorities are now trying to capitalize on two important gains. Of these two gains, the first is the complete demoralization of the Russian army, and the second is the greater willingness of Western governments to assist Ukraine in supplying weapons. Ukraine's lightning-fast, all-out counteroffensive has been hailed as one of the fastest and most lucrative operations in the history of warfare in recent centuries. To summarize this outstanding achievement, as a result of the Ukrainian attacks that started on September 6th and lasted for 10 days in total, the Ukrainian armed forces liberated 392 settlements in the area of more than 8,500 square kilometers in the Kharkiv region alone. It is stated that more than 150,000 Ukrainian civilians were rescued from Russian occupation in these operations. Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Anna Malyar stated that she promised to provide information on the liberated areas of the Kharkiv region on Monday, and she fulfilled her promise today. The operational details of the Ukrainian counterattacks are kept secret until the successes are fully conclusive, to avoid any security vulnerabilities. Anna Malyar also emphasized the importance of considering these data in the general context of the war, not separately. Malyar emphasized that the front line is 2,500 kilometers, and the hottest conflicts continue within 1,300 kilometers. And since the ongoing war is a very dynamic process, the figures for the liberated areas are constantly updated objectively. Malyar also called for additional security and stability measures to be needed to make the areas liberated by the Ukrainian warriors safe for life, and urged all people to support this. Official reports on the number of liberated areas are provided with a deliberate delay, and the stabilization measures taken may or may not be taken into account and therefore vary. However, it is okay to say that these shared data are still timid data. Because the Ukrainian armed forces act calmer in their attacks in Kharkiv and Donbass, just like in Kherson, and do not share their data for a healthier progress of the operation. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky made a surprise visit to Izium, which was liberated from occupation on September 14th. Zelensky stands out as an exemplary commander-in-chief and a resistance and freedom fighter leader who has won the sympathy of the whole world. Zelensky's visit to Izium is seen as a very critical visit for eastern Ukraine. Standing in a cold drizzle amidst the debris left behind by Russia's chaotic retreat, President Vladimir Zelensky looked up at the sky on Wednesday, at the Ukrainian flag flying over the main square of a city retaken by a stunning counterattack a few days earlier. Today, when we look up, we are looking for only one thing: the Ukrainian flag, Zelensky told the soldiers in front of the city's bombed-out town hall. The president's appearance unaware at Izium, about 9 miles from the front in the northeast of Ukraine, was a tangible sign of Ukraine's rising morale and growing courage. This visit was proof that the army could and would remain loyal to Mr. Zelensky's security even near the front. Russian soldiers fled the city in a humiliating retreat last week, leaving tanks, trucks, and ammunition boxes on the streets, and Mr. Zelensky's visit underlined this humiliation. After addressing the soldiers, Mr. Zelensky held a minute's silence to commemorate those who died in the fighting. His aides say he later took pictures with the soldiers, then left so that the Russian army wouldn't launch a missile into the square, while he and government ministers were within easy range. Meanwhile, arms shipments from the European Union have slowed, but its leaders sided with Ukraine despite the throes of a growing energy crisis caused by the war. Ursula von der Leyen, a senior EU official, proposed measures to mitigate rising prices and said on Wednesday that sanctions against Russia will remain in effect. The fact that Putin's energy move against the West also does not work drags him into a deep pessimism. Ukrainian forces were taking advantage by fighting on the outskirts of Lyman on Wednesday, according to Ukrainian officials. The city near the Russian-occupied Luhansk province could serve as a starting point for further eastward advances. But military analysts say the rapid advance of the Ukrainians risks stretching very fine lines that could expose the recaptured towns to Russian attacks. Despite manpower and organizational problems, Russia still has a significant advantage over Ukraine in supplies and ammunition. And as Russian forces build new defensive positions, the front lines may freeze into a bloody stalemate that depletes Ukraine's strength over the winter. Russia has also demonstrated its willingness to strike civilian targets far from the front. Hours after Zelensky's visit, a salvo of cruise missiles hit the central Ukrainian city of Kryvyi Rih, the president's hometown, where residents said a dam was damaged. But the attacks of the Russian army only cover civilian targets and do not slow down the operations of the armed forces of Ukraine. The city appears to be in the early stages of returning to normalcy in Izium, where soldiers patrol the eerily deserted streets and explosions are heard every hour as Ukrainian soldiers clear mines. However, it is thought that normalization will be achieved as soon as possible. While the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian armed forces are settling in Izium, the Russian army is busy mourning the capture of the most important war center in the region by the Ukrainian armed forces. Russian graffiti still strewn on a sign leading to the city proclaimed New Moscow, next to an abandoned Russian tank and green ammunition boxes. About 40,000 of the town's pre-war population remained in the city during the occupation. The Kharkiv offensive, and especially the entrance to Izium, was a major setback for Russia's war effort. By threatening a flank of Russian forces in the eastern Donbas region, military analysts say the attack almost completely ruled out Russia's safe capture of the Donbas. The region became the center of Russia's military targets after the failed attack on Kiev, and Russian President Vladimir Putin cited the invasion in February as one of his reasons. He claimed that Russian troops were deployed to protest Russian speakers in Donbas against the Ukrainian government, falsely claiming that the Kremlin was full of Nazis. Let's assume that these allegations are true. Then why did the Russians flee without trying to protect the Russian-speaking separatists they came to protect? Even the fact that even Russian soldiers do not believe in Putin's cause and think that these territories they occupy are unfair humiliates Putin terribly. Ukrainian Deputy Interior Minister Anton Gerashchenko also said that the collapse in Russian morale was a greater success of the counterattack than the regained territory. Russia has already lost a certain part of the war by losing Izium. Pro-Russian bloggers who previously applauded their army and recently criticized its leadership for setbacks were devastated by Ukrainian President Zelensky's visit to Izium. They vaguely want an overhaul of the Russian leadership. This bitterness should not be treated with vodka, but with urgent decisions, fundamental reforms of the system. So the Russians are secretly raising the voice of the revolution, and soon it can be heard much more clearly. Russia must urgently get rid of this cancerous cell and prevent its future from being plunged into greater darkness by ending its fascination with war. Otherwise, it seems that much greater dangers await Russia. While we wish success to the Ukrainians in their war of freedom, we wish all Ukrainian and Russian soldiers and civilians fighting in Ukraine to be freed from Putin's tyranny. Thanks for watching. By subscribing to our channel and opening notifications, you can be the first to know about our most intense, satisfying reports and analyses.